Imagine you have entered a game where the main character is the real monster. Korin entered the game he once played, only to discover that every woman in the world had disappeared. At first, Korin thought this strange new world was simply different from the game he remembered. After all, he had been transmigrated into the game as nothing more than a useless side character. He wasn't the protagonist. He was basically an NPC with barely any importance to the original story. So with nothing better to do, Korin decided to explore this world for himself. And that's when he met Sihu Park, the main protagonist of the game, but Korin soon discovered something strange about him. Sihu wasn't from this world either. Just like Korin, Sihu was originally a person from Earth who had somehow been transmigrated into the game. The difference was, Sihu had become the protagonist. The two quickly became an incredible team. They fought monsters together, explored dangerous areas, and survived battles that should have been impossible. But the longer he stayed with Sihu, the more one thing started bothering him. There wasn't a single woman anywhere, not one. Every person they encountered was male. At first, Korin ignored it. Maybe this world was simply different from the game he remembered, but that explanation stopped making sense. Because in the original game, women were everywhere. Many of them were important characters, so where had they gone and why had nobody seemed to notice? Korin couldn't let the question go. One night, while everyone else was asleep, Korin decided to investigate on his own. He followed a series of suspicious clues through the building until finally, he discovered something hidden beneath it, a secret basement, and the moment he stepped inside, his entire understanding of Sihu shattered. Weapons, spell books, rare equipment, and there was special-grade woman being kept inside the room. Korin's blood ran cold. These weren't random disappearances. Someone had been collecting them, and then Korin noticed something that made his heart sink. Every clue led back to Sihu, the man he had fought beside, the man he had trusted. The man he believed was the hero of this world, was the mastermind behind the disappearances. Korin immediately confronted him, but Sihu didn't deny anything. He simply looked at Korin. That's when Korin finally understood. Sihu didn't care about this world or the people living in it. To him, they were nothing more than resources. And the truth about Sihu was even more horrifying. He wasn't human anymore. He had become a demon, a monster hiding behind the face of the game's protagonist. And his hands were already stained with the blood of nearly 100,000 people. Korin now knew his secret, and Sihu couldn't allow that. Without warning, Sihu attacked. Dark chains erupted from the ground and wrapped around his body. Sihu slowly walked toward him. "You should have kept pretending you were my friend." Korin struggled desperately, but there was nothing he could do. Sihu raised his hand, a dark spell formed around him, and then everything went black. Korin's consciousness was swallowed by a dark void. He thought it was over. He thought he had failed before he had even understood what was happening. But then, he opened his eyes. Korin froze. The room around him looked familiar, too familiar. He looked around in disbelief. He was back. Back to the exact moment when he had first transmigrated into the game, the moment when everything had begun. Korin slowly realized what had happened. He had been given another chance, but this time, he wasn't going to explore the world, and he certainly wasn't going to trust Sihu, because Korin already knew how this story ended. He knew who the real monster was. Korin clenched his fists. This time he had only one goal: find Sihu, stop him, and prevent the massacre before it ever begins. Sihu's true awakening was about to begin. In the original timeline, the Academy entrance ceremony was only 5 days away, and that was when Sihu would receive the strange powers that would eventually turn him into an unstoppable monster. Korin couldn't let that happen again. He immediately set out to find him. But when he finally reached the area, he was already too late. Sihu had already joined a small group of students, and they were about to encounter something far more dangerous than any of them expected. A second-tier Beowulf suddenly appeared from the forest. Before anyone could react, boom, the beast charged straight into the group. One student was sent flying and collapsed instantly. Another student immediately stepped in front of Sihu. "Run. I'll hold it back." But the Beowulf was simply too powerful. One attack later, he collapsed as well. Sihu was now completely exposed, but just before the beast could finish him, someone appeared. It was Arisha, one of the most powerful NPCs in the entire game, and she wasn't just any warrior. She carried one of the 6 supreme blades, the Demon Slayer blade. In a flash, Arisha intercepted the Beowulf and saved Sihu's life. For a moment it seemed like everything was under control, and Sihu was about to reveal his true nature. Instead of thanking Arisha, Sihu secretly pulled out a knife and attacked her from behind, a poisoned knife. The blade cut her. Arisha staggered for a moment as the poison spread through her body, but despite the dizziness, she kept her composure. She tightened her grip around the Demon Slayer blade, her eyes locked onto the Beowulf. She was still planning to kill it. That's when Sihu attacked again. He threw another knife toward her. Arisha barely dodged, but the sudden movement disrupted her footing. That was all the Beowulf needed. The monster lunged. Arisha managed to strike it with her blade, but the attack still sent her crashing to the ground. Corin watched the scene, and then he saw it, that smile, that cold, twisted grin. There was no doubt anymore, that Sihu is true monster. This was the same monster who had murdered nearly 100,000 people in his previous life. Just then, something splashed across his face. Mushroom liquid. The scent immediately spread through the forest, and the effect was instant. The surrounding beasts suddenly became aggressive. They all turned toward Sihu. What the? Sihu desperately tried to dodge the creatures attacking from every direction. While Sihu was busy fighting for his life, Corin rushed toward Arisha. She was badly injured, but thankfully she was still alive. Corin quickly dragged her away from the battlefield, and that's when he felt it. Someone was watching him. Corin turned around. Sihu, their eyes met. What are you doing here? But there was something else Corin noticed. Sihu's expression wasn't that of someone who remembered him. There was no recognition in his eyes. He didn't remember the previous timeline. Corin finally understood. The regression had changed everything. Sihu had returned too, but without his memories. That meant Corin had an advantage for the first time since returning to this world. He had caught the monster completely unaware. Sihu attacked first. Corin immediately responded. He was far more skilled than Sihu. He knew his fighting style, he knew his habits, he knew how he would attack, but there was one problem. Sihu's body was far stronger. His superior stats and physical strength overwhelmed Corin's movements. Every time Corin landed an attack, Sihu barely reacted. Corin was being pushed back, but he refused to stop. He chained together everything he had. Sihu blocked almost everything until Corin saw one opening, the knife. Corin moved instantly. He drove the blade straight into Sihu. Silence. Sihu looked at Corin. Just then he died, because after everything that had happened, after everything Sihu had done, Corin had finally killed the monster, and for the first time, Corin had changed the future. A notification suddenly appeared. The main character has died. Corin is now the sub-player. Corin immediately looked toward Arisha. She was still alive, but the poison had left her barely conscious. Her vision was spinning, and if she lost control of her body, she could even bite her own tongue. So Corin did something completely unexpected. He put Sihu's dead arm between her teeth. Bite as hard as you can. Removing the poison was going to hurt, but Corin didn't have time to waste. He grabbed Arisha and used his knife to remove the poison from her body. It was painful, but he managed to save her life. Now he needed to make an antidote to bring her fever down. By the next day, Arisha finally opened her eyes. She found herself in a hospital, but the person who had saved her was already gone. She didn't even know who had rescued her. Meanwhile, it was finally time for the academy entrance ceremony. Corin arrived at the station where all the students were gathering. A girl suddenly raised her hand. First-year students, gather around. She looked playful and harmless, but Corin didn't know it yet. This girl was actually one of the major threats of the first chapter. She was a second-year student, and today she was assigned to guide the new students to the academy. Soon, everyone was brought into a massive hall. A teacher stepped forward and taught them how to open their status windows. Corin checked his own. His stats were completely abnormal. Then came the evaluation. Students were ranked from 1 to 6. Only one student received rank 1. 4 students received rank 2. And Corin, rank 6. Sounds terrible, right? Don't worry. Our boy was still completely out of their league. The evaluation simply hadn't figured him out yet. Then the battle evaluation began. A huge object suddenly dropped from above. Corin already knew what was coming. It carried 3 weapons, a sword, a blade, and a spear. Corin chose the spear. The moment he did, 3 fifth-tier hounds appeared. Corin immediately threw the spear. Boom. 1 hound disappeared instantly. The remaining 2 didn't last much longer, 12 seconds. That's all Corin needed to clear the first level, but then, nothing happened. Corin waited and waited, still nothing. Outside the portal, the teachers were watching everything. One teacher noticed something strange. Corin was sitting down and yawning. The teacher assumed there had been a problem with the test, so he released 3 more hounds. He's only rank 6. It'll take him hours to clear this. The teacher turned his attention toward the other students. Meanwhile, Corin had already killed all 3 when the teacher looked back. Corin was still sitting there and still yawning. The teachers were stunned, so they released the same beasts again. Corin looked annoyed. Why do I have to keep killing these things? 7 seconds, that's all it took this time. The teachers couldn't believe it, so they increased the difficulty. A 4th-tier demon appeared, a boar. Corin eliminated it in less than 4 seconds. Next came a 3rd-tier owl.
You're next!
This one actually gave Korin some trouble, but he eventually took away its vision and finished it instantly. The teachers had no choice. They brought out a fifth-tier demonic spirit, and this time there was a problem. Demonic spirits couldn't be seen by ordinary people, and Korin couldn't see it either, but that also meant something else. A spirit couldn't attack someone who couldn't see it. It had only been a theory until Korin proved it. 1 minute passed, nothing happened. Korin simply resigned from the match. The teachers were completely stunned. Korin had broken the existing records despite receiving the lowest evaluation rank, and because of his performance, he was promoted to a fifth-tier knight. Korin simply thanked the teacher. For everyone else, the evaluation had been a test. For Korin, it was barely a warm-up. Meanwhile, all the students were gathered in the hall where the principal welcomed the new batch. But Korin barely paid attention. Something else had caught his eye. A bully had already found his next target, a weak-looking student. Before things could get worse, Korin stepped in. He handled the situation so smoothly that instead of turning the students against each other, he actually made them friends. Someone watching from the side couldn't help but notice Korin's actions. And it wasn't just anyone. She was starting to develop a little crush on him, but Korin had more important things to worry about. The very next day, the students gathered again for another lesson. While everyone else listened, Korin looked completely bored. Then his eyes landed on the student he had saved from the bully. The nerd. Korin quietly whispered something to him, a grimoire. The two quickly made a deal, and later they met inside the library. They weren't there to study. They were searching for a secret grimoire, but there was one obvious problem. If it was truly a secret, why would anyone leave it sitting on a library shelf? Luckily, Korin already knew where to look. He led the nerd to a hidden passage. A secret door opened. The nerd stared in shock. Behind it was an ancient, terrifying chamber, and that's when Korin did something completely unexpected. He punched the nerd straight in the face. The poor guy didn't even know what happened. He immediately passed out because Korin hadn't brought him here for protection. He needed bait. A powerful spirit suddenly appeared. It attacked Korin, but the attack didn't work. Korin couldn't see the spirit, and apparently something you can't see can't hurt you, so Korin used the unconscious nerd instead. The spirit possessed his body, and now Korin was facing the real guardian of this hidden chamber. But there was an even bigger reason Korin was willing to take this risk. Hidden inside this palace was an ancient grimoire, left behind by a king who had lived 800 years ago. And that king was the spirit standing in front of Korin. The battle began. Despite being one of the weakest first-year students on paper, Korin slowly gained the upper hand, but when he was about to finish the spirit, he stopped, because Korin realized the spirit wasn't evil. He was simply a man who had made a terrible decision. The king revealed the truth. He had been turned into a vampire, and he feared that one day he would lose control and slaughter his own family and servants, so instead of risking their lives, he sealed himself inside this palace. Korin reassured him that his family was safe. The king finally relaxed. He apologized for attacking Korin and released himself from the curse. But before disappearing, the ancient king offered Korin something incredible. 3 of his grimoires, and these weren't ordinary books. Every single one contained an absurdly powerful ability. Korin had just walked into the palace looking for one secret grimoire and walked out with 3. Just then, the nerd finally woke up. His first reaction, his jaw was killing him. Yeah, that was Korin's punch. But Korin hadn't forgotten their deal. He handed one of the ancient grimoires to the nerd, and that single book as their deal. From now, those grimoire is gonna change everything.